A panicked woman is stranded in a thunderstorm until a small-town mechanic starts singing to calm her down. And by morning, she owns the garage. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The thunder came low and long, like a growl rolling across the fields, and then the sky cracked wide open. Rain came in sheets, hammering the tin roof of Reed Auto like 1,000 nails dropped from the clouds. Inside, Caleb worked by flashlight, his shop darkened by a power outage that had taken the whole block with it. He didn't mind. The quiet, save for the storm, let him think. Let him feel the rhythm of socket wrenches and worn bolts. And the comfort of knowing that even when the world outside went wild, a good pair of hands could still make something work. A gust of wind slammed against the shop doors. The temperature had dropped fast, too fast. Caleb set down his wrench and moved to the entrance, squinting out through the rain. That's when he saw them. Headlights flashing just once through the curtain of water, then disappearing. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes, and spotted the sleek white car across the street, nose down in the muddy ditch. The hazards blinked like a heartbeat. Someone was inside. Without hesitation, Caleb grabbed his coat from the hook and jogged across the gravel lot, boots slipping slightly on the slick ground. The wind howled, and the rain stung like needles. As he neared the car, he could see the figure behind the wheel. A woman. Her hands were locked tight on the steering wheel. Her shoulders trembled. The window was fogged, but her face was pale and pressed near the glass. He knocked gently. No response. Then again, harder this time. She flinched. "Hey, he called, loud but calm. "It's okay. I'm here to help." Still no movement, just the shape of her curled tighter into herself. And that's when Caleb did something he hadn't done in years. He started to sing. Just a soft hum at first, then the words came. An old country lullaby his mama used to sing when storms made the lights go out. It wasn't fancy, wasn't perfect. But it was steady, familiar, a thread of calm in the chaos. Slowly, the window cracked open. A single tear mixed with the rain on her cheek. "Can you help me?" she whispered. "Yeah," he said, voice warm through the cold. "Let's get you out of this storm." The rain hadn't let up, not even a little. It came in waves now, thick, relentless, like the sky had decided it was done holding back. Caleb swung the shop's heavy doors shut, bracing them with a plank just in case the wind turned meaner. The power was still out, the only light inside coming from the flickering lantern on his workbench and the occasional flash of lightning outside. He'd stayed longer than usual, patching up an old Chevy for Mr. Harlan, who needed it for morning deliveries. Small towns like Millersville didn't run on deadlines. They ran on favors. He pulled his jacket tighter and stepped outside to lock the side gate when something caught his eye. Brief and sharp. Headlights, barely visible through the downpour, blinked once. Then again. Then disappeared behind a thick curtain of rain. Caleb narrowed his eyes toward the highway bend just beyond the shop. It wasn't a place people stopped unless something was wrong. He grabbed his flashlight and started across the gravel lot, boots sinking slightly in the oversaturated ground. As he got closer, the shape of the car came into view, angled wrong, tires buried in the shoulder's muck. It was no ordinary car either. Even in the storm, the sleek white body shimmered. The grille alone looked like it belonged in a museum. Foreign, expensive, definitely out of place in a town where most folks drove whatever still ran. He stepped up to the driver's side window, tapping lightly with the butt of the flashlight. No response. The windows were fogged from the inside, but through the haze, he saw her. A woman, maybe late 20s. She was gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The door handle jiggled faintly, stuck. Caleb circled around, tried the passenger side. Locked. "Hey," he called, voice raised just enough to carry over the rain. "You okay in there?" Nothing. The next flash of lightning lit up her face, eyes wide with fear, breath fogging the glass, her lips trembling like she was mid-panic. Caleb didn't hesitate. He stepped back, placed a steady hand on the top of the car, and said gently, "I'm not leaving. I'll get you out." And then he sang again, just like before. Not because he had to, but because somehow it was the only thing that seemed to reach her. The rain pounded harder, like it was trying to drown the world in noise. Caleb's flashlight beam cut through the sheets of water in shaky pulses, casting broken halos on the side of the luxury car. The woman inside still hadn't moved. Her hands were welded to the wheel, her shoulders locked in place, breath fogging the windshield in frantic bursts. Every flash of lightning lit up her panic like a spotlight, and with each rumble of thunder, her body flinched as if struck. He crouched down beside the window, water soaking through his jacket, and tapped again, softer this time. "Ma'am," he said, voice even but firm, "it's okay. You're safe now. Just open the door." No response. She stared ahead, unblinking, like she couldn't even register his presence, like she wasn't here at all. Caleb had seen that look before, back when his younger brother came home from the war and sat through entire meals without saying a word. Whatever this woman was facing, it wasn't just about a broken car. He tried the door handle again, locked tight. Lightning cracked just overhead, a jagged split across the sky, and she gasped. Sharp and loud. Her hands flew from the wheel to cover her ears, and she rocked slightly in her seat, lips moving fast, like she was reciting something under her breath. Caleb's heart clenched. "Hey," he said again, softer now, trying to cut through the storm with calm. "You're not alone. I'm right here." Still no answer, and then he did the only thing he could think to do. He began to sing. Not loud, not showy, just a low, familiar tune. Something old and steady, the kind of melody that could hold a person together when the world felt like it was cracking apart. He saw her eyes flicker toward him, just for a second. "That's it," he murmured, still singing between words. "You're doing great. Just listen to my voice." She didn't unlock the door, but she stopped rocking. Her hands slid down from her ears. The panic hadn't vanished, but it had loosened its grip, just enough for her to hear him through the rain. The storm raged on, but inside the space between Caleb and the car window, something quieter was beginning to take hold. He stayed crouched in the downpour, his breath visible in the cold, as he kept humming the old tune. It was a song his mother used to sing when the power went out, when the roof leaked and the thunder felt too close. A lullaby soaked in dust and heartache, but strong enough to anchor anyone who needed steady ground. His voice wasn't polished, but it was warm, human, real. Inside the car, the woman's eyes stayed locked forward at first, unblinking, but the way her chest moved, short, shallow inhales turning just a bit slower, told him she heard him. He saw her fingers twitch against the wheel, then grip again. He kept going, letting the melody fill the space where words had failed. "It's just a song," he murmured gently between the lines, "but it's yours if you need it." Lightning flashed again, and she flinched, but didn't curl inward this time. Her hands, trembling, reached for her seatbelt. Slowly. Her eyes slid toward the side window where Caleb knelt, drenched to the bone, and still humming like nothing in the world could shake him. Then, finally, a quiet click. The lock popped up. Caleb stood, his legs stiff from crouching, and gently pulled the door open. She didn't say anything, just stared at him, soaked lashes clinging to her cheeks, confusion and relief tangled in her expression. "Hey there," he said softly, like he was greeting a child waking from a bad dream. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." She didn't speak, but she nodded. Her body moved with hesitation, like each muscle needed permission. Caleb offered his hand, not rushed, not demanding, and she took it with trembling fingers. As he guided her out, the wind cut through the trees behind them like a warning, but neither of them flinched, because for one small moment a storm had been quieted, not by force, not by power, but by a song. The rain showed no mercy as they hurried across the gravel lot. Caleb keeping close beside her like a steady shadow. Her designer flat slipped in the mud, and twice he reached out to steady her. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just clung to his presence like it was the only solid thing left in a world unraveling around her. Her coat, soaked through, clung to her like wet paper. The wind cut cruelly against them, and by the time they reached the shop doors, both of them were shivering. Caleb unlatched the heavy double doors and ushered her inside. The warmth hit them immediately, not from electricity, but from an old propane heater in the corner that buzzed and glowed like a campfire in the dark. The smell of oil and rain-dampened concrete filled the room, oddly comforting in its plainness. "Here," he said, grabbing a clean blanket off a metal shelf and wrapping it gently around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of motor oil and detergent. She didn't seem to mind. He motioned toward the folding chair near the heater. "Sit there. Let the heat catch up to you." She nodded, still not saying much, and sank into the chair. Her hands reached out slowly toward the warmth, fingers pale and trembling. Caleb moved quietly, setting a battered kettle on a hot plate he kept for late nights. He opened a tin of instant coffee. Nothing fancy, but hot was better than nothing. As the kettle hissed, he grabbed a chipped mug and set it in front of her. "Cream and sugar?" he asked, then added with a soft chuckle, "Or are you more of a triple espresso kind of woman?" That pulled something close to a smile from her, just a flicker, but it was real. "Black is fine," she whispered, voice hoarse from the cold and the crying. He poured the coffee and handed it over carefully, like she was something fragile the world had nearly broken. Outside, thunder growled again. She jumped just slightly, but this time she didn't curl into herself. She just sipped the coffee, hands still shaking, as Caleb sat down across from her and said, "You're safe now. Whatever the storm was, it's not going to touch you in here." The coffee steamed between her hands, warming her fingers more than her body. She hadn't stopped shaking, but it was less now, like the fear had loosened its grip, one finger at a time. Caleb sat across from her on an overturned milk crate, a respectful distance away. He didn't stare, didn't prod, just sat there in silence, letting the propane heater hum and the rain do the talking. After a while, she glanced up. Her eyes were red, lashes still wet, but there was something steady about the way she looked at him now. "I'm Elise," she said softly. She didn't offer a last name, no credentials, no explanation, just that. Caleb gave a small nod, like he'd been expecting that moment, and had no intention of making it bigger than it needed to be. "Nice to meet you, Elise," he said. "I'm Caleb." She gave a tiny, tired smile. "Thank you for earlier. I didn't mean to fall apart like that." "Storms do that," he replied, not unkindly. "They hit harder when the rest of life's already wearing you down." That earned him a faint chuckle. It was more exhale than laugh, but it carried weight. He stood up, walked to a wooden cabinet by the wall, and pulled out a pair of thick wool socks, clean, unworn, folded neatly like he had them ready for someone who might need them someday. "Your shoes are soaked," he said, offering them gently. "These should help." She looked at the socks, then back at him. There was something almost comical about it. A man with oil on his hands offering her socks like it was the most natural thing in the world. And somehow it was. "Thank you," she said again, quieter now, as she peeled off her soggy designer flats and slipped into the dry warmth. "You're safe now," he told her just as gently. "Doesn't matter where you came from or what's waiting outside that door. Right now, you're just Elise, and you're not alone." She didn't speak again, but she nodded, wrapped tighter in the blanket, and stared into the soft orange glow of the heater, like maybe, for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The heater hummed low in the corner, throwing soft shadows on the garage walls, and the storm outside showed no sign of slowing. Thunder cracked like it was peeling the sky open, and rain rattled the tin roof hard enough to drown out thought. Caleb moved around the space with quiet purpose, checking for leaks near the windows and making sure the propane tank had enough left to carry them through the night. Elise sat still, coffee now finished, the blanket wrapped tighter around her shoulders. She reached for her phone, the screen lighting up her face briefly before fading again. She sighed and held it up. "No bars, not even a flicker," she said. Caleb gave a short nod. "Cell tower's been down since the wind picked up. Happens every now and then out here. We're on the edge of the valley. Signal comes and goes, even on a good day." She set the phone down on the workbench beside her. "And the power?" "Transformer blew about 2 hours ago," he said. "They'll send a crew in the morning, maybe. But this time of night, in this kind of weather, we're not seeing anyone until sunup." Her eyes drifted to the garage doors, then to the lone lantern on the bench, its glow barely reaching the corners of the room. The realization settled over her slowly. "We're stuck here," she said. Caleb glanced at her, not panicked, just processing. "Yeah," he replied simply. "But stuck's not the worst thing. There's heat, coffee, and I've got a deck of cards somewhere, if you're into losing." She smiled faintly, then shook her head. "You really don't get rattled, do you?" "I've had too many nights like this to waste the energy," he said. "Besides, the only thing worse than a storm is thinking it's the end of the world." Elise leaned back in the chair, the tension in her posture finally starting to melt. "I don't think I've ever been completely unreachable before. No email, no texts, no calls." "Kind of peaceful, huh?" Caleb said, easing into a seat nearby. She looked over at him, something unreadable behind her eyes. "Maybe," she whispered. "Or maybe I was just overdue for a night like this." The rain softened to a steady rhythm, no longer violent but persistent, like it had settled in for the long haul. Inside the garage, the heater's glow cast a golden hue over the concrete floor. The shadows stretched wider now, quieter, as if the storm had moved from fury to reflection. Elise sat cross-legged in the chair, the blanket now tucked around her like a cocoon. Her shoes sat by the door, drying slowly, and her phone remained untouched on the bench. Across from her, Caleb leaned back on the crate again, sipping from his own chipped mug, its rim slightly cracked, but still holding strong, like everything in this place. She looked over at him, studying his face for a moment. "You're not going to ask, are you?" she said finally. Caleb raised an eyebrow, amused but calm. "Ask what?" "Who I am, what I do, why a woman in a $60,000 car ended up having a panic attack on the side of a rural road." He shrugged slightly, eyes steady. "If you want to tell me, you will." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh, more like surprise. She was used to curiosity, the kind that came with strings. Every man before had wanted a piece of her story, not because they cared, but because they thought it gave them something to hold over her. But Caleb, he just waited. She stared into the glow of the heater before her voice came again, quieter now. "I used to hate storms when I was little. My dad traveled a lot, and when it rained, I'd sit by the window, waiting for his headlights. Every time thunder cracked, I swore it was the sound of something going wrong." Caleb didn't speak, just nodded once, slow, letting her keep the pace. She paused, watching him for a reaction, but he gave none, no prying, no judgment. So when the engine died tonight, and the rain came all at once, "I guess I was 7 years old again," she said, voice catching only slightly, waiting for someone to show up. "You're not waiting anymore," he said quietly. "You made it through the storm." She looked at him, something soft flickering in her expression. "And you didn't even ask." The hours stretched thin as night deepened around them, the garage wrapped in shadows and the low hiss of the propane heater. Outside, the storm hadn't left. It just rested, waiting to remind them it still held the sky. Thunder rolled again, louder this time, echoing off the hills like distant cannon fire. Elise flinched slightly, her hand tightening around the blanket, eyes darting toward the ceiling like she was bracing for something worse. Caleb noticed but didn't speak. Instead, he leaned back and tapped his fingers gently against the rim of his mug. A beat, a rhythm. Then, without warning, he began to hum. It was the same old country tune, the one he'd used earlier to reach her when words couldn't. The melody moved through the air like smoke, slow, steady, familiar. There were no lyrics, not at first. Just that soft rise and fall, the kind of sound that wrapped around the walls and asked nothing in return. Elise closed her eyes. For a long moment neither of them moved. The thunder came again, cracking sharp and cruel, and this time she didn't flinch. Instead, she let the hum guide her breath, in and out. Safe. Then, as if by instinct, her lips began to move, barely audible. Just a whisper of the melody. Not quite on key, not confident, but present. It surprised even her. She paused. But Caleb didn't. He kept going, like he'd heard her, and welcomed her in without saying a word. She tried again, this time a little louder, letting the sound find her, letting it live somewhere beyond the fear. Their voices mingled, soft and imperfect in the quiet space, a harmony of strangers sharing something that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with trust. When the verse ended, they both stopped. Silence settled in, not heavy, not awkward, just full. Elise opened her eyes and looked across the space at Caleb. He gave her a gentle smile, the kind that didn't need words to be understood. "You remembered the melody," he said. She nodded. "It remembered me first." The morning broke slow and golden, as if the storm had never happened. Pale light crept through the high windows of the garage, casting long, soft beams across the floor where puddles had dried into faint outlines. Outside, the roads steamed as the early sun warmed the wet asphalt. Birds returned, chirping like the world had simply rebooted. Caleb stirred from his corner near the workbench, rubbing a stiff shoulder. He'd dozed off on a stack of folded tarps, the heater humming beside him, still burning low. Across the room, Elise sat wrapped in the same blanket, awake but still, watching the sun climb with quiet eyes. "Power's back," he said, nodding toward the humming light above them. She smiled faintly. "So are the cell towers. My phone buzzed nonstop an hour ago." He didn't ask who was trying to reach her, didn't ask what kind of world was pulling her back, just handed her the fresh cup of coffee he'd made once the breaker kicked back in. "Thanks," she said, taking it with both hands. "For everything." Caleb leaned against the bench, arms folded. "Not every day I end up spending the night in my garage with a stranger who sings in storms." That made her laugh, soft and real. "Not every day I meet someone who doesn't try to guess my net worth in the first 5 minutes." He shrugged. Didn't seem important. She looked down at the coffee, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper. It wasn't a business card, just her name, Elise, and a phone number in tidy handwriting. "In case you ever need anything," she said. Caleb took it without a word, slipping it into his toolbox drawer like it belonged among the things that mattered. "You headed out?" he asked. "Yeah," she said, finishing the last sip. "I've got things to get back to." She didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. And maybe that was why she hesitated at the door, glancing back at him once more. "Goodbye, Caleb." "Take care, Elise." And just like that, she stepped into the sunlight, still just Elise, and still holding on to more secrets than she was ready to share. The garage returned to its rhythm like nothing had ever paused it. By mid-morning, Caleb was elbow-deep in a rusted Dodge that smelled like spilled coffee and worn-out dreams. The bell above the door jingled now and then, regulars coming in for tire patches, oil changes, and stories that started with, "You got a minute?" The storm was yesterday's news. The heater was off, the tarps folded back in the corner, and Elise's blanket had been washed and tucked away without ceremony. Her number stayed in the drawer, buried beneath warranty slips and half-used notepads. Caleb hadn't touched it once. Not because he didn't think about her, he did. Plenty. But thinking wasn't the same as expecting. And Caleb Reed wasn't the kind of man who built futures out of single nights, no matter how rare they felt. He wiped his hands on a rag and leaned over the fender, listening to Mr. Harlan explain how the truck started making a weird groaning noise whenever it turned left. The same truck Caleb had patched together more times than he could count. He nodded, adjusted the carburetor, and cracked a quiet joke about the truck groaning because it was sick of being driven in circles. Mr. Harlan laughed. The town rolled on. In Millersville, the days came steady. The problems were small, and the wins came in hours saved and engines revived. There were no high heels or luxury dashboards, no secrets humming beneath a blanket in the corner of the shop. Just the whine of an air ratchet, the smell of grease, and the occasional breeze through the open bay door. A week passed. Then another. Elise didn't call, didn't show, and still, every time the wind picked up or a white car passed by the edge of town, Caleb's eyes followed it just a little too long, but he always turned back to the work, back to the bolts and belts and people who depended on him for more than just their engines, back to business. Because as far as he knew, that chapter had closed, with sunrise and secrets. The sun was high when the black SUV rolled into the lot. Quiet engine, tinted windows, tires too clean for Millersville's dirt roads. Caleb was under the hood of a '99 Buick, half listening to the radio and half cursing a stripped bolt that refused to budge. He didn't see the vehicle at first. He just heard the engine cut, the soft slam of a door, and the sudden hush that always came when something didn't quite belong. He wiped his hands on his jeans and stood, brow furrowed, expecting another out-of-towner asking for directions to the antique shop or a gas station with better coffee. But then he saw her, not soaked, not shaking, not locked behind a fogged window, just standing there in the open light. Elise. She wore jeans this time, a dark jacket, her hair pulled back neatly, no makeup hiding tired eyes, no panic clinging to her posture. She looked grounded, like someone who'd decided to come back on purpose, not by accident. Caleb didn't speak, not right away. He just held her gaze, watching for whatever this was supposed to be. Elise smiled first, small, earnest. "Hey." His voice didn't come immediately. Too many thoughts, too much surprise layered under that steady stare. "You get lost again?" he asked finally, resting a hand on the car beside him. She stepped forward, hands in her jacket pockets. "No, not this time." The wind caught a loose strand of her hair, and she brushed it behind her ear. She looked around the lot like she was seeing it differently now, like it mattered, like it had roots. "I've been thinking about that night," she said. Caleb nodded once. "Me too." A pause stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy, just full. "I'm not here to run or hide," she said quietly. "I'm here because I want to be." That's when he noticed it, the absence of walls. No guarded eyes, no hidden identity. She wasn't just Elise anymore. She was Elise, back in Millersville, standing in front of a man who hadn't asked for anything, and yet somehow gave her everything she didn't know she needed. And this time, she wasn't going anywhere. It started like any other Wednesday morning, coffee lukewarm, the first truck on the lift by 8, and Caleb already elbow-deep in a stubborn alternator. The spring air carried the smell of fresh cut grass and gasoline, and the radio played a country song that barely reached past the clanking of tools. Then came the metallic screech of a car door and the sound of boots on gravel, familiar but not routine. Wayne Holloway, the landlord, stepped onto the lot in his usual way, shoulders back, tie crooked, and an envelope tucked under his arm like a secret he couldn't wait to share. Caleb wiped his hands and straightened slowly, a bad feeling settling behind his ribs. Wayne didn't waste time. "Caleb," he said, short and tight, "just wanted to drop by and give you the update." "On what?" Caleb asked, though he already knew it couldn't be good. Wayne patted the envelope. "The property. It's sold." A full stop. The words hung there like dropped tools. For a second, Caleb didn't move. "You sold the garage?" he asked, his voice calm but low. "Got a cash offer," Wayne said, trying to sound casual. More than I'd ever get keeping at least. It's nothing personal, just business. The words stung more than Caleb expected. He glanced toward the bayed doors, the workbench, the cracked floor where he'd taught a neighbor's kid to change brake pads. This place wasn't just rented space. It was his father's memory, his daughter's future, his everything. Before he could say anything else, another voice cut in. "I'll take it from here, Wayne." Elise. She walked forward, heels soft against the gravel, calm, sure. Her eyes locked on Caleb's, not the envelope, not the man beside him. Wayne looked confused. "You?" Elise nodded. "I'm the buyer." Silence stretched again, only this time it felt different, like the ground had shifted. "I bought it to keep it standing," she said, "not to shut it down." Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. "I didn't do it as a favor," she added. "I did it because this place matters, and so do you." And just like that, the garage wasn't his lease anymore. It was her promise. The papers sat on the workbench like an accusation, crisp white against oil-stained wood. Caleb stared at them, arms crossed, jaw tight, the muscles in his shoulders drawn like coiled wires. Outside, Wayne's SUV disappeared down the road, tires spitting gravel, and the garage was left in a silence that buzzed louder than the tools ever could. Elise stood a few feet away, calm as ever, hands folded in front of her like this was just another boardroom decision. But Caleb wasn't calm, not even close. "You bought it?" he said finally, the words thick with disbelief. "Without telling me?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Yes?" He shook his head and took a slow step forward. "Why? You think I couldn't handle it on my own? That I was just some charity case in need of saving?" "No," she said, quiet but firm. "You know what this looks like, Elise." His voice rose, frustration edging out reason. "It looks like some rich woman rolled through town, found a sad little shop, and decided to slap a bow on it and call it noble." Her face didn't change. She didn't fight back, didn't explain. "I don't want a handout," he added, the words sharper than he meant. "This place, it's mine. I've bled for it. I've built it bolt by bolt." Elise stepped forward, just enough to reach the workbench. She pulled a small envelope from her jacket, set it down gently on top of the sale contract, and looked at him one last time. "I know what this place means to you," she said, "and I didn't do this to take it away. But if you can't see that now, maybe you need time." She didn't ask him to read it, didn't ask him to understand. She just walked away. Caleb didn't follow, didn't call after her. He stood alone in the shop, the old fan humming faintly overhead, the scent of engine oil hanging thick in the air. The envelope sat untouched, Elise's name written in small, elegant script. He stared at it like it might explode, because whatever was inside wasn't just a letter. It was everything he didn't want to admit he might need. Caleb didn't open the letter right away. He left it sitting on top of his old red toolbox, right where Elise had placed it. For hours he moved around it, working in silence, replacing brake pads, aligning tires, tuning up an engine that purred but still coughed on cold starts. But no matter how loud the air compressor hissed or how deep he buried himself in grease, the envelope stayed in the corner of his eye like a whisper he couldn't unhear. By nightfall, the shop emptied. The last customer drove off with a wave and a receipt tucked under the windshield wiper. Caleb locked the doors, turned off the main lights, and stood alone beneath the warm hum of the hanging work lamp above the bench. The envelope was still there, clean, unbothered by the dust or the oil smudges. He sat on the stool, exhaled slowly, and picked it up. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate, like every stroke had weight. He opened the flap carefully and unfolded the single sheet inside. It wasn't long. "Caleb, I didn't buy the garage to rescue you. I bought it because you rescued me. That night, in the middle of a storm, you didn't ask who I was. You didn't judge. You didn't want anything. You sang, you stayed. And when I couldn't breathe, you gave me space to exist without questions. No one's ever done that for me, not without expecting something back. This garage matters to you. I saw it in your hands, in the way you speak to people, in the way you didn't flinch when everything around me was falling apart. I don't want to take it from you. I want you to have what I never did. A choice. If you don't want me involved, I'll step back. No questions, no strings. If you do, I'll be here. Elise. Caleb read it twice, then again. It wasn't pity. It wasn't power. It was grace. He folded the letter carefully, pressed it flat, and slid it into the top drawer of the toolbox. Right next to the wrench his father gave him, because some things deserve to stay close. 2 days passed. The storm was long gone, but its echoes lingered in the creak of the garage door as it rolled up each morning, in the way Caleb's eyes drifted toward the lot every time a car pulled in. The letter stayed tucked in his toolbox, folded neatly beside the socket wrench he never let anyone borrow. He hadn't called her, hadn't texted. But the silence wasn't avoidance. It was consideration. Late Friday afternoon, the wind carried in the smell of rain again, not a storm, just memory, and Caleb was under the hood of an old Chevy when he heard the tires crunch against the gravel. Slow, familiar. He didn't look up right away. She didn't call out. Instead, Elise stood quietly near the open bay, arms crossed loosely, waiting like someone who knew the rules of his world and didn't want to disrupt them. Caleb finished tightening the last bolt before he wiped his hands, glanced over, and gave a nod. "You back to buy the diner next?" he asked, half a smile tugging at his mouth. Elise smiled too, softer than before. "Thought I'd start small." He set down the wrench and walked over, leaning against the doorway, the sun warming the edge of his jaw. "So what now?" he asked. "You my boss?" She shook her head. "Never." She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin folder. Not contracts, not conditions, just a proposal, simple and clean. "I don't want to change a thing. The name stays. The shop stays yours. Your crew, your call. I'm not here to take over." Caleb narrowed his eyes. "Then what are you offering?" She stepped closer, meeting his gaze without blinking. "Support. Nothing more. You lead. I'll back you. Whatever you need to grow, to breathe, to dream bigger. I'm here. No strings, just belief." The words weren't flashy. They didn't carry the weight of power or pity. They carried respect. Caleb looked down at the folder, then back at her. "Why?" Elise shrugged, her voice gentle. "Because sometimes the best thing money can buy is someone else's freedom to stay exactly who they are." He didn't answer, but for the first time in years, he started thinking about what this place could become. The garage was dark except for the single shop light Caleb left on over his workbench, the same one that had lit long nights and stubborn repairs for years. Outside, the town had gone quiet, the streets emptied of trucks and gossip and early spring breeze. Caleb sat alone on the stool, Elise's folder open beside him, the pages barely touched. He hadn't read every line. Didn't need to. What mattered wasn't written in ink. It was in her voice when she'd said, "You lead." He ran a hand through his hair, then leaned back against the workbench, staring up at the ceiling like answers might be hidden in the rust stains and time. The garage had always been his anchor, passed down, built up, survived on spit and grit. And now, here was this woman, offering more than money. She was offering belief, a kind of trust he hadn't been given in a long time. But trust didn't mean surrender. So by morning, when the sun cut through the bay windows and the shop smelled of coffee and damp earth, Caleb had made up his mind. Elise showed up just before 9, her SUV quieter than her presence. She stepped out, cautious but not uncertain. Caleb was already at the bench, sleeves rolled, grease on his hands like usual. The only difference was the clean envelope resting near the mug of black coffee he'd poured just for her. He didn't make her wait. "I'll say yes," he said, voice steady, "but on one condition." She tilted her head, watching him carefully. "No cameras, no press, no rebranding or slogans, No shiny plaques telling folks who owns what. He looked up, eyes clear. No suits walking in here trying to turn it into a photo op. A beat of silence. Then Elise smiled. Not the polished kind, but the kind that let relief and respect shine through all at once. Deal. Caleb nodded once. Good. Then let's keep it simple. She reached for her coffee, lifted the cup like a silent toast. To what? He asked. She grinned. Good work, honest hands, and starting something real. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb let himself smile without bracing for loss. It was a Tuesday morning when she came back. Not in a storm, not in a sleek power suit, and not with the weight of the world in her eyes. Just Elise, in jeans, a navy sweater, and a soft smile that reached further than any of her previous visits. She parked the SUV without a fuss and walked across the gravel, holding two things Caleb never expected to see in her hands. A cardboard bakery box and a reusable grocery bag with the words "Homemade Matters" stitched into the side. The garage was alive with its usual buzz, tools clanking, country radio playing low, and Caleb under the lift with a wrench in one hand and brake fluid on the other. Emily was there too, curled up in the office corner with crayons and a spiral notebook, drawing something involving hearts and dinosaurs. Elise knocked gently on the open bay door like she wasn't sure if she should just walk in. Caleb ducked out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a towel, brows lifted at the sight of her. I brought peace offerings, she said, holding up the box. Cookies, from the Rusty Whisk downtown. He smirked. Bribing the crew already? Figured it was time, she said. I've got investors in boardrooms, but this place? This one's won over with sugar. By the time she reached the center of the garage, the smell had already crept out. Warm vanilla, melted chocolate, and something vaguely cinnamon. Two mechanics, Joel and Manny, wandered in from the back, curious as cats. You didn't have to do this, Caleb said, even as he lifted the lid and caught sight of thick chocolate chip cookies, still warm enough to bend. I know, she replied, eyes scanning the room, but I wanted to. Just then Emily peeked around the corner and spotted Elise. She ran up wide-eyed, tugging on Caleb's sleeve. That's the lady who was stuck in the storm, right? Elise crouched, offering the box. Hi again. I brought cookies. Emily lit up. Are these the kind with the melty middles? The very ones. Caleb watched as his daughter took one, grinning like she'd just made a new best friend. Elise looked up at him with a smile that no longer needed to hide behind formality. And for the first time, she didn't feel like someone visiting a garage. She felt like someone who belonged. It was the third time she showed up without calling. No chauffeur, no blazer. Just jeans, sneakers, and a ponytail pulled through the back of a baseball cap that read Millersville Little League Champs. Caleb spotted her from across the lot, one foot casually propped on the curb as she watched Joel struggle with a stubborn tire iron. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the garage door, arms crossed, waiting to see what she'd do. She didn't disappoint. I think you're using the wrong angle, she said to Joel, crouching beside him like someone who actually knew what she was talking about. Joel raised an eyebrow, skeptical, but instead of brushing her off, he handed her the iron. Be my guest. To everyone's surprise, she didn't flinch. She planted her foot like she'd done this before, maybe on a much older car, maybe in a very different life, and popped the bolt loose with a firm crack. Damn, Joel muttered, clearly impressed. You've done this? A few times, she said, brushing her hands off on her jeans. My first car broke down more often than it ran. Manny passed by and offered a quiet clap. Boss lady's got torque. Elise just grinned. Caleb finally walked over, shaking his head. You planning on joining the team full-time? She stood, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. Only if you've got room for someone who's mildly useful and makes decent cookies. Useful, he said, nodding at the tire. We'll see. Cookies? Still up for debate. She laughed then, head tilted back, not caring when a streak of black grease smeared across the side of her nose. It should have looked out of place, this woman, with her sleek city polish, elbow-deep in tire grime, but somehow it didn't. It fit. "You've got something on your face," Caleb said, smirking. She wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand and missed completely. "Other side," he said, taking a step closer. Then, without asking, he reached out with a rag and gently wiped the grease from her nose. Her breath caught for half a second, but she didn't pull away. Neither did he. And in that tiny moment, something unspoken settled between them, quiet, steady, and real. By the end of the week, Millersville was humming with curiosity. Not the loud kind. The quiet, careful kind that gets passed from porch to porch and counter to counter like sugar in coffee. Stirred in until everything tastes just a little bit different. Elise had only been seen in town 3 times, but that was more than enough. She'd helped change a tire, brought cookies, and was spotted leaving the garage with a grease-smudged smile. That was more public interaction than some folks had in a month. It started with harmless wonder. "Is she his cousin?" old Mrs. Pennington asked while waiting on her oil change. "She looks like his cousin." "Doesn't have the same nose," replied George, the postman, who somehow always noticed things like noses. Then came the murmurs at Rosie's Diner. "Drives a black SUV, out-of-state plates, real quiet type, but polite. I heard she paid for the last round of repairs on the town's fire engine. I heard she bought the garage. No one's confirmed that. Well, Caleb sure didn't buy it, and she's there every other day." The theories bloomed. Some said she was an investor from Chicago. Others were convinced she was some kind of inspector from a secret program trying to modernize rural businesses. A few swore they'd seen her in a magazine once, something about luxury cars and billion-dollar mergers, but no one really knew. What they did know was this: Caleb Reed didn't let just anyone into his garage. He didn't laugh with just anyone. And he sure as hell didn't let anyone wipe their hands on his backup shop rag, which Elise had done without flinching. Emily didn't help quiet things down either. She'd been telling anyone who'd listen, "Miss Elise brought cookies and helped fix a car. She's cool." The town started watching, not out of malice. Millersville wasn't cruel, just curious. Protective, maybe. Because for the first time in years, something or someone was shifting the stillness of their quiet mechanic's life. And folks could feel it in their bones. This woman wasn't just passing through. Caleb was underneath a lifted truck, boots poking out and radio humming low, when he heard her voice. "Hey, grease monkey." He slid out slowly, blinking up at her from the creeper, face streaked with sweat and oil. She stood just outside the bay, hands tucked behind her back, her usual calm somehow touched with nerves. "You're early," he said, sitting up. "Didn't expect to see you till Friday." "I brought you something," she said, stepping forward and pulling a small cream-colored envelope from behind her back. Her hands, usually steady, fidgeted just slightly around the edges. He raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. More cookies?" "No," she said with a faint smile, though that would have been easier. She held out the envelope. It looked expensive. Heavy cardstock, gold trim, his name written across the front in her handwriting. He took it slowly, wiping his hands on a rag before opening it. Inside was a black invitation embossed with her company's name. At the top, Annual Gala and Awards Dinner. Below that, a date, a time, and a location Caleb had only ever heard in movies. He stared at it for a long second, then looked up. "Elise, what is this?" She exhaled, crossing her arms, but not defensively, more like someone bracing for the answer to matter too much. "It's not business," she said. "Not for me. I want you there. Not because I need you to make a statement or to impress anyone, just because it's part of my world, and I'd like you to see it." Caleb turned the card over in his hand like it might change if he stared long enough. "You sure?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. "I don't care if you wear a tux or your flannel. I just want you in the room." He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, really looked, and saw the worry behind her composure. Not fear of rejection, but hope. The kind that didn't come easy. She stood quiet for a beat longer, then added gently, "Say yes, Caleb. Even just this once." And he realized this wasn't about black ties or business. It was about trust. And an open door she'd never offered to anyone before. The valet took Caleb's truck keys with a straight face, but not before glancing at the rusted tailgate like it had offended the marble beneath his shoes. Caleb didn't care. He adjusted the sleeves of the only suit he owned, black, stiff, a little too snug in the shoulders, and followed the hum of violins into a world that didn't smell like engine oil and coffee, but like polished glass and expensive cologne. The ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations. The crowd sparkled in tailored gowns and tuxedos, laughing softly over champagne flutes as if the world outside didn't exist. Caleb stood near the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. He looked like what he was, a man from a garage who'd taken off his boots and wandered into someone else's movie. Then he spotted her. Elise moved through the room like she belonged there, and she did. Elegant black dress, hair swept up, calm smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. People turned when she passed. Some nodded with deference. Others stepped aside like they weren't sure whether to admire her or fear her. Caleb watched as she shook hands with the governor, exchanged cheek kisses with a fashion mogul, and offered a polite laugh at something he could tell wasn't funny. When she finally saw him, her face lit up in a way it hadn't for anyone else. "You came," she said, crossing the room with practiced grace and something just shy of relief. "You invited me," he replied, eyes scanning the crowd. "Didn't realize I'd be the only one without cufflinks and a tax shelter." She laughed, genuinely, and touched his arm. "You clean up well." Caleb smirked. "You mean I look like a wrench wrapped in gift wrap?" "I like wrenches," she said softly. As the night went on, Caleb watched her from beside the bar, watched the way people leaned on her for decisions, how her nod could silence a room, how her laughter was polite but never full. He saw the respect, the fear, and the loneliness tucked neatly behind her eyes. She ruled this room, owned it. But she never looked at it the way she looked at the garage, or at him. The band shifted into something slower, something softer. Piano keys cascading like falling rain, the low thrum of a cello rising just beneath the hum of conversation. Couples drifted toward the center of the room, champagne glasses exchanged for cautious steps and whispered words. Caleb stood near the edge of it all, still nursing the same glass of water he'd been holding for over an hour, feeling more like furniture than a guest. Then Elise appeared beside him. "Dance with me," she said. No question in her voice, just an invitation that felt like warmth, in a place too polished to hold heat. He didn't answer, just took her hand and followed her onto the floor. Her fingers slid into his with surprising ease, and for a moment the room dimmed. The lights, the gowns, the board members and CEOs, all of it faded as they moved in slow, quiet rhythm. She smelled like something unfamiliar but comforting, and her hand rested against his shoulder like it belonged there. "I can't believe you're here," she whispered, eyes locked with his. "You invited me, remember?" he murmured. "Doesn't mean I expected you to show up." "Doesn't mean I planned to," he said, then added, "but I'm glad I did." They moved like that for a while, caught in a pocket of stillness in a room that never really stopped buzzing. Her cheek brushed his shoulder for a brief second, and his hand tightened slightly at her waist. She looked up, and whatever lived behind her eyes, doubt, longing, something unnamed, moved closer to the surface. But before it could become something more, a sharp voice cut through the music. "Elise?" A man in a tailored navy suit stood just off the floor, gesturing with 2 fingers. His eyes didn't land on Caleb, only her. She hesitated, just long enough for Caleb to know she didn't want to go, but she did. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling away with one last squeeze of his hand. He watched her walk toward the board member, her back straight, her face already rearranged into composure. Caleb didn't wait for her to return. He left quietly, stepping out into the night where the air was cooler, the silence familiar, and the sky, finally, clear. The rain came in soft this time, not like the storm that first brought her to him, but steady and quiet, like a whisper against the tin roof of the garage. Caleb was alone again, just him and the rhythm of the drops and the low hum of an old blues record playing in the corner. He worked with the bay doors open, letting the rain roll in and dampen the concrete floor, not caring that his flannel shirt was already soaked through. There was something about the rain that made him feel more awake, more honest. That's how she found him. Elise stepped out of her SUV without an umbrella, her heels clicking briefly before sinking into the muddy gravel. She didn't flinch at the cold or the water seeping into her sleeves. She walked across the lot like a woman on a mission, but this time there was no polish, no armor. Just Elise, soaked and determined, and entirely real. He didn't look up at first, just kept tightening the bolts on a brake caliper like he hadn't noticed her standing there. She stood in silence for a moment, then said softly, "You left." "I did," he replied, still not meeting her eyes. "I looked for you. I know." The rain pattered louder against the roof as she stepped closer, water sliding down her hair, her cheeks, her coat. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking through the storm. "About the gala, about leaving you standing there, about everything I didn't say." Caleb finally stood and looked at her, wiping his hands on a towel that did little to hide the ache in his eyes. "You didn't owe me anything," he said, steady and quiet. "But I wanted to," she replied, voice almost a whisper now. They stood there for a long beat, rain soaking them both, the world around them hushed and blurred. "I wasn't trying to run," she added. "I was trying to protect something that maybe didn't need protecting." Caleb nodded slowly, stepping just a little closer. "Then maybe it's time to stop running." And for the first time since that stormy night, she let the silence fall without fear. Because even in the rain, some things are worth standing still for. Rosie's Diner didn't pretend to be anything fancy. The booths were patched with duct tape, the coffee tasted like burnt ambition, and the jukebox in the corner only worked if you gave it a gentle slap on the side. But on Thursday night, it was perfect. Caleb held the door open, letting Elise step inside first, both of them still shaking off the last of the rain. She wore jeans again, faded, cuffed at the ankles, and a soft flannel shirt that looked like it had once belonged to someone who fixed tractors for a living. No makeup, no press, just her, real, quiet, and fully present. They slid into the booth near the window, the one with the view of Main Street and the flickering lamplight that always made everything look like it belonged in an old movie. Caleb ordered his usual, black coffee and pancakes, extra butter. Elise surprised him by ordering the same. "I figured," she said with a smirk, "if I'm going to understand this town, I should start with its strongest vice." He chuckled. Careful, Rosie might throw in a side of unsolicited life advice. "She already told me I look too thin and need to eat more carbs," Elise replied, raising her brows. "I told her I came to the right place." They talked. Not about business, not about boardrooms or balance sheets or gala mishaps, but about real things. Elise's childhood summers in upstate New York, how she used to draw in the dirt with her sister and pretend they owned a horse ranch. Caleb told her about the first car he rebuilt with his dad, how it barely ran, but they drove it like it was a Cadillac. The coffee came and went. So did the pancakes. Time stretched around them in that quiet, late-night diner way, where the world outside seemed to wait patiently just beyond the windows. At one point, Caleb leaned back and said, "You ever have a night where nothing big happens, but everything feels right?" Elise looked at him, her eyes soft in the amber light. "I think I'm having one now." And for once there were no headlines, no expectations, no masks, just two people finally beginning. The first Caleb heard of it was from Rosie herself, who walked into the garage mid-morning with flowers still on her apron and a clipboard in her hand. "Someone left this at the diner for you," she said, setting it down on his workbench with a thud. "Didn't say much, just asked that you take a look." Caleb wiped his hands on a rag and squinted down at the papers. At first he thought it was junk mail, some kind of county flyer, but as he flipped through the first page he froze. It was an application, a scholarship, local, specific, and deeply personal. The Millersville Hands-On Futures Program, open to any student in the county interested in learning a trade: mechanics, carpentry, welding, agriculture. No GPA requirements, no fancy essays. Just a simple question: what do you want to build? Caleb flipped to the second page and stopped. There, typed neatly near the bottom, was a list of mentors. Right between Edgar Willis, carpenter, and Marcy Thomas, agriculture educator, was his name. Caleb Reed, auto repair and community leadership. His brow furrowed. "What the hell is this?" Rosie just smiled. "You tell me." It didn't say her name anywhere. Not on the front, not in the description, not in the contact information, but the design, the wording, the quiet humility of it. It had Elise written all over it. She hadn't told him, hadn't asked for approval or recognition. She'd just done it. Later that day, when he tracked down the community center director, he got the full story. Elise had come in weeks earlier, quiet, focused. She asked how many kids had dropped out of traditional college paths in the last 2 years, asked how many wanted to work with their hands but didn't have the means. Then she wrote a check, a big one, enough to fund apprenticeships, tools, stipends, and full trade school tuitions for a handful of local teens. No cameras, no press release, just belief. Caleb ran a hand down his jaw, heart thudding somewhere between awe and something that felt suspiciously like pride. She hadn't built the program for attention. She built it for a town she didn't have to care about, and for a man who'd shown her that sometimes the quietest work matters the most. It happened just after sunset. The garage lights blinked once, then gone. The steady hum of the old radio cut out mid-song, and the heater went silent. Caleb didn't even flinch. He just glanced up at the ceiling like it had betrayed him, then reached for the flashlight on the bench. But before he could even flick it on, Elise's voice cut through the dark from the corner of the garage. "I guess I picked the right night to hang around." She was already there, perched on the stool near the shop fridge, with a cup of gas station hot cocoa in hand and a smile that somehow still managed to glow in the dim. Caleb shook his head, amused. "You bring the outage with you?" "Maybe I'm cursed," she said, grinning. "Or maybe Millersville's power grid just knows when we need a pause." He lit a few candles from the emergency stash under the sink. Short, stubby things that had survived who knows how many winters. The warm light threw long shadows over the garage walls, painting everything in soft amber. They didn't talk much at first, just sat there, side by side on milk crates and toolboxes, sipping cocoa and listening to the gentle rhythm of rain starting on the tin roof. It was peaceful in that way silence can be when it's shared. Then, quietly, Caleb began to hum, the same old country tune. Elise glanced sideways, a smile tugging at her lips. She didn't interrupt. She just let the melody carry her back to that night. The storm, the panic, the way his voice had found her when nothing else could. This time her voice joined his, softer than his, slightly off-key, but full of something pure. Their voices moved together, not rehearsed or perfect, but honest, like a memory being rewritten under candlelight. When the song faded, neither of them spoke. They just sat there in the glow, elbows touching, hearts full in the stillness. It didn't matter that the lights were out. What mattered was that this time they weren't alone in the dark. The boardroom smelled like tension, masked with lavender polish and expensive cologne. The glass table reflected nothing but icy expressions and corporate agendas. Elise sat at the head, spine straight, eyes calm. She was dressed like power, tailored blazer, hair pulled back, no room for softness, but beneath the surface something had shifted. They started with numbers, then with speculation, and then with concern thinly veiled as strategy. "Your recent choices," one of the senior partners said, "have raised eyebrows. The purchase of that garage, the scholarship fund, your repeated absences from investor meetings." Elise didn't flinch. "They're personal decisions." Another board member leaned forward, folding his hands. "But when you're the face of this company, there's no such thing as personal." There it was. The undercurrent had turned into a wave. "You're compromising your role," the chairman added. "We're not saying don't support your community endeavors, but public association with a mechanic shop in a town no one's heard of, it's not exactly in line with our brand identity." Her hands stayed still on the table, but her fingers curled just slightly. "And Caleb Reed?" the marketing lead asked. "Is he just a friend, or should we be bracing for a headline?" The room froze for a beat. Elise stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just with the kind of control that made silence louder than shouting. "I didn't build this company to play dress-up for investors," she said, voice low but unwavering. "I built it to make something that mattered." She paused, gaze sharp. "And if you think my time in Millersville, supporting young people, investing in real skill, standing beside someone who's never once asked for anything, is bad for business?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Then you'll need a new CEO?" No one moved. No one breathed. She gathered her folder, turned without another word, and walked out of the boardroom, heels clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence that had needed saying for far too long. She didn't look back, because she already knew who she was walking toward. The sound of hammers replaced the usual hum of engines. For the first time in decades, the east bay of the garage didn't smell like oil or exhaust. It smelled like fresh sawdust, new drywall, and something rare in a place like Millersville. Possibility. Caleb stood near the open door, clipboard in hand, as a group of local teens hauled in boxes of donated tools, workbenches, and welding masks. They moved with the awkward excitement of kids who weren't used to being trusted with responsibility. But here, no one hovered, no one doubted. They were building something, literally and otherwise. Elise watched from the side, sleeves rolled up, ponytail loose, laughing as Emily ran by wearing a welding helmet far too big for her. She didn't just fund this, she was in it, sweeping floors, helping mount tool racks, even painting the trim along the classroom's doorway herself. The space was small, but intentional. One wall held rows of salvaged parts for hands-on training. Another was lined with framed photos, black and white snapshots of the shop over the years, from Caleb's father's first wrench to a grainy print of young Caleb standing beside his first rebuilt truck. Elise had found the photos tucked in a dusty drawer and insisted they be displayed. "This isn't just a program," she'd said. "It's a legacy." They added a chalkboard, a whiteboard, and a coffee station that always smelled like home. It was half shop, half sanctuary, for the kids who'd been told they'd never be more than what they already were. Caleb watched as a teenage girl figured out how to strip a wire harness, her eyes lighting up like she'd just cracked a secret code. He didn't say much, just nodded when she looked up for approval. That was all it took. On a warm Saturday morning, they unveiled the new sign. It wasn't flashy, just carved wood, hand-painted letters. Reed Auto. Built with trust. Backed by grace. Caleb looked at the name, at Elise standing beside him, her hand slipping quietly into his. And for the first time, the garage didn't just feel like his past. It felt like everyone's future. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of the parking lot lamplight and the steady beams of Caleb's truck headlights cutting through the dark. The garage was quiet now, doors locked, the last echoes of laughter from the day's training fading into the warm night air. Caleb walked out with the keys jingling in his hand, Elise beside him, her hair wind-tousled and face flushed from a long day spent elbow-deep in paint and wiring with the kids. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The kind of silence that stretched between them was the good kind, familiar, easy, like the pause at the top of a hill before coasting down together. Caleb turned to lock the shop's side door, giving it the same double-check tug he always did. "That should hold," he muttered. When he turned back around, Elise was standing at her SUV, passenger door open. She leaned inside and fumbled with the glove box for a moment. "You forget something?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just pulled out a small velvet box. No fancy bag, no ceremony, just a quiet breath and that look she always got when she was about to change everything. "I bought this place to start over," she said, her voice steady but soft. "At first, I thought it was about giving something, giving the town something, giving you something, giving myself a chance to feel useful." Caleb stepped closer, brows knit, heart already racing. "But then it became something else," she continued. "This shop, these kids, you. It's not about starting over anymore." She held out the box and opened it. Not a diamond, not anything flashy. Inside sat a simple, hand-hammered ring with a faint inscription along the edge. "Here, always. I want to keep building this life with you, if you'll have me." For the first time in his life, Caleb Reed was speechless. Not because he hadn't thought about this moment, but because she'd just handed it to him, not with a question mark, but with everything they'd become stitched into one quiet, perfect sentence. He stepped into the headlight's glow, took her hand and whispered, "You sure you want to marry a guy who still forgets where he put his torque wrench?" She laughed, already crying. "Only if he says yes." He kissed her then, under the hum of the lights and the ghosts of every storm they'd survived, and this time he didn't need to sing. The future had already begun. The radio crackled to life just as Caleb flipped the closed sign on the garage door. It was one of those late spring mornings when the sky hadn't made up its mind, half sun, half moody clouds, and the air smelled like wet pavement and fresh hope. He wiped his hands on a rag, turned up the old radio on the counter, and froze mid-step as a familiar name floated through the static. Wah! And in a story that's been quietly making waves across the county, Elise Harrow, former CEO of Harrow Motors, has been confirmed as the benefactor behind the new Millersville Trade Initiative. But it's what she found in that small town that's captured hearts. Caleb blinked, slowly walking over to the radio like it might bite. The host's voice was smooth, almost amused. Turns out, Harrow didn't just write a check and disappear. She stuck around, bought a garage, started mentoring kids, fell in love. And yes, folks, this part's verified. She now splits her time between two headquarters, one in the city and one right off County Road 8, behind Reed Auto. A pause. Now, here's where it gets better. The host's tone softened. They say it started during a storm. One night, a billionaire lost signal and got stranded in the rain, panicking behind the wheel of a stalled car, and a mechanic with nothing but a flashlight and an old song to his name walked out and helped her breathe again. No cameras, no questions, just kindness. Caleb leaned on the counter, listening as the story unfolded like a fairy tale someone else had written, but every word etched with something he remembered in his bones. They say she never forgot that moment, and neither did he, because that night, under a leaking garage roof and the hum of a propane heater, something started, something that didn't care about titles or bank accounts, just two people meeting where they were. And then the line that would be repeated for years in classrooms, coffee shops, and community newsletters. She was a billionaire, he was a mechanic, but a song in a storm built something bigger than fortune. Caleb looked out the garage window. Elise was in the back lot, helping a student replace a radiator, smiling, laughing, real. He didn't need a headline, but hearing it told like that, it felt like the world had finally caught up to what they already knew. The orchard behind the garage bloomed every spring now, white petals drifting like soft snow across the gravel lot, where rusted bumpers used to pile up. Reed Auto still stood, the sign gently faded from years of sun and storms, built with trust, backed by Grace. Inside, the tools still hung on the same wall. The floor bore the same old cracks, and the radio still hummed that low country twang on Saturday mornings. But everything had changed. Caleb was in the garage, showing a new round of apprentices how to check a timing belt without losing their knuckles. His laugh echoed across the lot, steady, low, full, the kind of laugh that meant he'd stopped surviving and started living. On the front porch of the house they'd built just behind the shop, Elise sat on the swing with their daughter curled into her lap. The little girl was 7, all knees and curls and endless questions. Her hands were sticky from popsicle juice, her eyes curious and bright. "Mama," she said, tugging at Elise's sleeve, "how did you and Dad meet?" Elise glanced toward the garage, watching Caleb wipe his hands on an old rag, then toss it over his shoulder like he always did. She smiled, not the practiced kind, but the kind that came from 1,000 ordinary moments stitched together into a life she never imagined she'd be allowed to have. "Well," she said, brushing her daughter's hair back gently, "once upon a time, I got lost in a storm." The little girl's eyes widened. "Like a real one? With lightning and everything?" "The loudest I'd ever heard," Elise whispered. "And I was scared. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't breathe. Then someone found me, not because I asked, just because he saw me." "What did he do?" her daughter asked, snuggling in closer. Elise didn't answer right away. Instead, she began to hum. That same old tune, soft, familiar, the one that lived in Caleb's voice, in the candlelit silence of a garage during a blackout, in the very beginning of them. "He sang me home," she said at last, resting her chin on her daughter's head, "and I never left."